All right, I went ahead and started the recording. I can trim starting at this point if needed. Have a message.
Thank you.
Can you please? Here.
Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. Excited. Let's wait a minute and get started after Awesome does some introductions.
Yeah, I'll probably give folks maybe another 30 seconds or so.
We have a lot of people on the Zoom.
I actually can't tell because the Zoom screen is not up. So maybe yes. Maybe I do want that. Yeah, that's true. Cool. And then is the camera view on here somewhere?
Oh, to see
So-
your
Hey, so if you turn on the Zoom banner like that, then it blocks the screen share view a little bit. So there's a little more than a dozen of us on the Zoom, just in case that helps. But if you open up a Zoom window, then it blocks the PowerPoint view.
I'll minimize it when we get started.
Oh, okay, that sounds good.
You have the chat at the top if you may say anything. I don't know, maybe it's.
Yeah, so what it's doing is just blocking off that part of the screen, so we don't see like what's behind the screen there.
All right, I have hidden it.
All right, good morning, folks. We'll go ahead and get started. Excited to join in. You may be thinking, what an interesting fake background. Awesome, but I'm gonna tell you, it's not a virtual background. I'm actually on vacation with my family, and I'm still joining in because I didn't want to miss this at all. I've been looking forward to this one, to this forum talk. I met Eilis. I've got a little formal introduction too, but I wanted to share with you that I had a chance to meet with Eilis several months ago, and was just so excited with her energy, her ideas, and just the way she's approaching her work that incorporates artificial intelligence within just creativity. And so I'm really excited to be listening to this talk, and I'm excited for you all to join us. So Eilis Finnegan is an assistant professor of environmental design and interdisciplinary design program. It's focused on physical and digital environmental design in the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction at Auburn University. Eilis joined the faculty in 2023 following her graduation with honors from the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning at the University of Michigan. Got that in common with our provost. And she has a Master of Architecture, and she was also an R1 research assistant and instructor while she was at Michigan. She's also received her dual Bachelor of Architecture and Bachelor of Interior Architecture from Auburn University in 2019 and 2020. She's got some really awesome projects, especially around the state. A couple that I wanted to really highlight is she's got if you can detect, if you look at her bio, you'll see a theme in terms of some of the cool namings of the projects she's been working on. But she's got a gifting, ghosting, and gigawaste project that's been a CACP grant project, which rethinks the Widows Creek power plant, which is now a Google data center up in Jackson County, Alabama. And she's also been working on a project with the new Birmingham facility, the location that Auburn University has for some programming that's a little bit more aligned with artificial intelligence through the AI initiative team in the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. Without further ado, I'm really excited to hear from Eilis, so I'm going to turn it all over to her. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Awesome. I appreciate it. And thank you to Awesome and Jerry and David Hinson for helping get this ball rolling for me here. I'm excited to be here with all of the folks in the room and with people on Zoom for the AI AU Forum. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work I'm doing today that Awesome touched on, and then also talk about what we're doing in an AI course that I started in the environmental design program in the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. This semester is my second time teaching this class, and it just keeps evolving excitingly. So I'm stoked to show you guys what we're up to. So like Awesome said, my name is Eilis Finnegan, and I am an assistant professor of environmental design. I focus in our sort of scenography's digital and physical representation, world building, and media technology zone of our program. This is sort of a work in progress curriculum structure document that we've been teasing out. There's lots of different faculty in the program that have varying backgrounds between landscape architecture, ecologies, urban design, engineering, architecture and interiors, prototyping. We invite faculty from SIGD, so graphic and industrial design, to join us for certain courses. And we have lots of fun. So the students that I have for lots of my courses end up deciding that they may want to focus in some of the digital world building or environments design or scenography that we're up to. One of those students is in the room today, Fiona. I have a small collective that is operated by me and collaborates with folks back at the University of Michigan that I was working with before my time at Auburn, and then also with some of my other colleagues. I do AI research and also some work in extended reality, publication design, hybrid invention and representation, exhibition and prototype design, and then lots of my other courses beyond the AI class have to do with design methods and pedagogical structuring for an interdisciplinary program. Let's see, this PowerPoint is like huge, so it may lag a little bit when I scroll. This is just a little sample of student work that comes from both the AI course that I teach that I'll talk more about today, and then also from some of the other classes which involve an intro to design methods class. So students that are true freshmen, sophomore, they've just showed up in the program. And then also a capstone, which is kind of like a thesis, but it's an intensive 5-week summer studio. So some of this work is from graduating students. So the ENVD 4970 course is a special topics research class. Each faculty member has the opportunity to teach a 4970 level course focused on their body of work, their research methods, the things that they're investigating that they want to try to encourage students in their own focus to try to understand their methods better and also maybe take some of the research tactics and things that they learn in class and apply them to their own work. So the course that I've been working on, this 4970 class, is called AI and Hybrid Design. And we're focused on exploring the varying uses of different applications for generative AI that designers may be confronted with today, both in practice and in academic spaces. We're interested in students understanding the pace of these works, the scale of these works, and sort of by scale, I mean the durability of them, how much can we mine from these tools, and then also the outputs and where they're finding their autonomy in generating these things. We talk a lot about designing digital and real landscapes, objects, multimodal representations. We discuss trends, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then also trying to understand the influences of AI on the other sort of architecture, engineering, construction, design industries, and have lots of group discussions about those kinds of things, in addition to things like world building, game design, et cetera. The first 2 points of the course we're going to focus on have to do with those applications, their uses, and then also the ways that we're representing the outputs of those things. We start off with a series of ChatGPT exercises, and then we follow that up with a series of Midjourney works, followed by Runway, which is AI animations, and then Meshy AI, which is new to the course this fall. That has to do with generating 3D mesh objects from images and from text prompts. I'm going to talk about each of these in more depth, the first being ChatGPT. I won't get too much into what ChatGPT is. There's a description from ChatGPT on the screen. But basically, students, and when I introduce this part of the lesson, I ask them if they've ever used ChatGPT before, and they're like a little hesitant to raise the hand. But that's okay, because we're trying to use ChatGPT in some alternative ways for generating conversations with the bot rather than generating text for them to be using in some kind of paper format or other. We aren't necessarily looking for ChatGPT to provide response material for them to use and claim as their own, but rather just engage with the bot in a kind of interview format. I've worked on this a little bit. So in one of the publications I did recently for Disc Journal, I was having a conversation with ChatGPT and asking it to respond to me as if it's exhibiting symptoms of a neurological condition that I have, which was part of my research that I was thinking about the convergence between the language of neuroscience and neuroaesthetics and the ways that we're sort of anthropomorphizing our machines and using neurological language to be describing them as seems natural. So this work was something that I was pretty excited by and trying to use this method for, that then sparked an interest in having students try to tackle similar things. So this is a sort of sample of what an assignment sheet for, hey y'all, the class might look like. So the students start developing a series of text prompts that have to do with them imagining a kind of cart or a drivable object. We landed on this format, I think, because some students leaned into that in the first version of the class, and it seemed really successful just in terms of scale and our ability to generate content for these carts in a 3-credit-hour class. So got pretty excited about that, and they start to develop a series of text prompts that have to do with varying scales. And then those students start to use ChatGPT as a way to describe the larger scenographic environment for that scenario. So in this example, we asked ChatGPT to write iterations for an inflated quad bike built by zippers and zip ties with pop star branding. So a student is trying to describe what this speculative cart might be like and asking ChatGPT to give greater descriptions about the spatial design, the layout. You can see soundscape on here, props and details, and a sort of general description of what that environment might be like. We also asked it to provide a series of design or art precedents that may be engaging with similar terms that they've been working on. And I wasn't sure how this would go. I thought maybe the results would be predictable, but they really weren't. There were lots of great precedents on there that I had never heard of before, that I found that students started to use that tactic with ChatGPT in other classes, where they start to prompt in what they've been working on with their own authorship and asking for design precedents for them to dig into a little bit further. So some takeaways from ChatGPT. So we're interested in generating things like Mad Libs or infills for them from the prompts, generating project titles, subtitles, text templates, and then also things like mock interviews are really great for them. We're not interested in them developing body text, developing or spreading misinformation, or replacing analog methods for developing text. There was never a point where we asked them to have ChatGPT rewrite their initial prompt or sentence. It was all just sort of expanding upon the thing that they developed themselves. The next step from this is Midjourney. So once they have an idea for their cart, it's now time to use image generation to envision the environment that ChatGPT was starting to describe and that they are also ideating upon. So instead of using something like the Imagine prompting, which sort of repixelates images based off of a series of text prompts that is pulling from the Midjourney database and algorithm, which is sort of commonly known as being a little bit fussy and there's not so much transparency about how those images are mined from the internet to be a part of their algorithm. With things like this, where you can see that the students got involved in thinking about what AI-generated images look like, if they are able to tell if something is AI-generated. And I think generationally, like most of them are really good at being able to tell if something is unreal or fake. But we had a really great discussion about this, especially with things like labeling as being made with AI that shows up on lots of their social media accounts and things like that. We talked about this at length in terms of how Imagine prompting generates architectures or images or environments that look like things in the top left. And we became more interested in the blend command in Midjourney, which allows you to curate your own images to go into this kind of DNA remix of the images you're prompting into the blend. So from there, students curated a set of their own photographs, their own drawings, their own models, in addition to images from other locations that they source and credit and place into templates like this so that we know where things are coming from, and then work a series of blends together with these kind of uncanny hybrids to develop different kinds of images of environments, which you're seeing here. This is some work by Haley Danner. The way that the blend images come out is trying to not be so photoreal, so predictable, that we really embrace the kind of oddities that might show up in some of these spaces or zones, the strange points of view, the kind of atmospheric or ephemeral quality of some of these things is what we're excited by. So students do a series of text to image exercises where they're using Imagine, and I like to say they kind of get over the cool hump. They get it out of their system that they're making things that are new and photoreal and interesting, and then they really lean into the blending of their own sources and things like that, and spoke at length recently. We just sort of wrapped up this section maybe a week ago, that they find that they have way more authorship and feel like they can claim some of this work really as their own because they curated the exact sources that went into it rather than generating the text prompts, which is good. That's the kind of ethics about using these tools that I'm interested in, of like making sure that we're crediting the sources that we're using, maintaining authorship and autonomy over the things that we're making. That really feels like it's part of the design process and not just using these tools for making quick outputs. So this is a tactic that I use myself. And this is some work that Awesome mentioned earlier from the Gifting, Ghosting, and Gigabytes or GigaWaste grant project that I've been working on, which reimagines potentials for the Widows Creek power plant in Jackson County, Alabama, which is now a Google data center. These are sites of high security. And I think it became of interest to me to start to generate visuals of what these spaces could be like if they had more public-facing potentials. This is just a sort of series of images from this. But I became interested in using this site also because Google data centers, I believe, are the ones that house the Midjourney servers. And there's also lots of ecological impacts in terms of liquid cooling those servers and pulling water from the Tennessee River, that I'm kind of diving in deeper into some of the writing that I'm doing for this. But the blended image tactic is what I use to generate lots of these visuals, which includes photographs from the Widows Creek coal power plant, includes digital models that I've been building, includes other kinds of sets and scenes into those blends, lots of strange hybrids, which is really the goal of some of this work. I pulled this image because we talked about it in class where I asked students, like, would you believe that this image is AI generated? And some said no, because it's got too many, it's too boring. They were like, AI images are flashy and cool, and this is just like a mundane back of house sort of utility space. But then we talked further about the difference between something like an AI image and an uncanny rendering, and that some of this work tends to fall into that latter camp of what a rendered space like this might look like. Also developing sort of worlds within worlds, generating images, and also generating the scenes or the sets that may construct those images is something that I'm regularly interested in. This is also some work that, or a method rather, that has folded into the Chicago Architecture Biennale collaboration that I did with Perry Kulper in 2023, which we were really grateful to be a part of. We were developing images, models, representations for depicting different industrial sites along the sort of Chicago, Gary, Indiana connection, and the Chicago Skyway. Looking at former industrial sites, ghosted figures, sculptures, statues that used to be a beacon of industrial power, and looking at different ways to combine photographs of those things, renderings of models, art, other kinds of illustrated information into these hybrid blends to generate these kinds of images and then start to develop models and things off of them. This work got published in AD recently, which we're really excited about, talking about visualizations, ghost stories, ghosting, AI. It was really interesting to start to have to talk about crediting these images, referencing the blends and the content where they came from. I remember the publishers were like, well, what's the text prompt for these images? And it's like, well, there isn't a text prompt. It's all blended images together that we've curated. So that was a fun challenge to get through some of that, but really a good lesson for me to then help the students figure out how they might credit and source all of the things that they're working with in class. This is also something that we're going to keep working on. Perry and I work together a lot, which I'm really grateful for. He's just an amazing mentor in person. For the Expanding CADC Reach in Birmingham, Alabama Study Away Outreach Research and Creative Work Grant. That is a mouthful. This is a grant that I and my other investigators received to develop a student workshop in Birmingham at the new facility in the Hood McPherson building. Perry will join us for a lecture and then also a weekend workshop where students will be using some of these blended image methods to start to develop potentials for different rooftops throughout Birmingham. And that's to be inclusive of architecture students, environmental design, landscape architecture, graphic design, and industrial design. The third phase of work in the class has to do with generating animations. In the previous version of this course, I had students generate animations of the cart that they started to model and represent. In this version of the class, because Runway has recently released Gen 2 and now Gen 3, they're starting to develop animations of the environments that they envisioned in Midjourney so that we get a little bit more depth, a little bit more scope of what this might look like, which has been really great. They just wrapped this work up this week. Let's see if it will go to the next one. So they have been developing animations of renderings. We've also been talking about how you can generate background or stock footage for different things. I've got some minor students in the class that are architecture majors, also some others that are pursuing majors kind of all across campus and then have decided to take this class. And we talked a lot about how animating certain bits of work might be really useful for them, especially if they don't have a distinct design background or the ability to rig and animate something in Blender themselves, that they can use something like this to elevate a piece of their portfolio or their project or their proof of concept, all in the interest of learning how to generate a visual narrative. So these are some examples from the previous version of the class, like I said, where they were using Runway to depict the kinds of motion or movement that their cart or their drivable may be operating with, which was pretty exciting. But I think the works from this semester have a little bit more depth to them. And that's also part of the evolution of the class, that each time I teach the class, hopefully it's different than the last because the software has updated. I'm trying to keep the class current and then also explore the ways that, for me, in terms of the scholarship of teaching and learning, how the class has changed over time, how I've had to change the way that I approach the methods over time has been something that I'm excited to continue to document. So this is a video generated from that still image that you saw on the previous slide. So Haley, in this case, had to sort of prompt or code in all of the camera movement, the text prompt that goes with this, where the still image shows up in the frame of the whole animation. It kind of shows up in the middle. And we talked a lot about also using motion brushing to highlight the specific characters or assets in the scene that she wants some particular motion assigned to. This is some work from Abby Rodich. She changed the aspect ratio for her image, and we talked at length about the kind of human movement or motion that Generation 3 of Runway has been doing right now. But maybe more interestingly to me and to her, she's an architecture student, is how some of the rest of the architecture in this scene starts to develop and is based off of the forms that are generated in the original image. You can see in the far left corner, there looks to be like half of a cathedral of some sort that's developed from maybe the geometry of the trees, the rest of the kind of Gothic or Romanesque nature of the architecture around it. We've also been increasingly impressed by how much geometry it maintains from the original blend image that she created, which is a little bit uncanny. It has a series of chairs and pews outside. It really was able to keep much of her work without machine hallucinating that far into the image that she produced. I wrote a paper about this for the Design Communication Association conference this year in Montana, hosted by Montana State University. This was great. This work I talked about in the paper is from the previous version of the class, but the real sort of takeaway for me that still reigns true for the version now is the way that students have become increasingly interested in short form video content to do with their projects. I think historically architecture, environments, design, I'm sure landscape architecture has representations that are still, and there's so many multimodal tools now that we can use to depict the environments that we're working on. I think this is especially true for the students that we see, or at least that are sort of in my focus area, that are interested in environments, sets, scenography, world building, that they may need other tools to depict the full breadth of the environment that they're working on that kind of go beyond a standard architectural drawing, because that's not the kind of milieu that they're getting into. And they found this to be really, really useful. This work also, or this method also was featured in Detroit Month of Design for the Constructing Futures International AI exhibition, where the call was there to ask folks to interpret what robots would start to look like in the future for constructing different parts of Detroit. I developed a series of images for this that were based off of some cybernetics, sort of cyber feminism that I was reading about and became interested in. It has a little bit to do with the kind of aesthetic or style of these things, in addition to some of the work that these robots are proposed to be doing. But the sort of key bit of this work was the way that the images became animated using Runway to really depict the way that the motion might be happening from these sort of multimodal, multi-arm robots, which became really exciting for me. So what is next for the class? Next week, or sorry, after fall break, I'll be introducing to them the use of Meshy AI, where you can insert both text and image prompts to generate 3D meshes of the things that you're uploading. This was not something that I had in the class in fall of 2023, partially just because it wasn't on my radar and maybe wasn't as developed as it is now. My undergraduate research fellow, Fiona, will be able to tell you that it's changed a lot since when we started using it to when we use it now. It kind of is constantly updating. My base for exploring this, and really for a big part of the class, has to do with some of the work of James Kasuth. This is 1 in 3 chairs, a sort of cheeky piece of work to talk about how images, models, and text of a thing could all be representative of that piece of art, of that piece of work. Are all 3 of them related? Are they separate things? Do they work as a kind of collection? I developed this 1 in 3 chariots as a way to talk about that, using Meshy to generate the model, using Midjourney to generate the image, and using the \described command in Midjourney to generate some of the text prompt for that, or the text description. Meshy is really useful for extended reality projects, VR projects, game building. So again, another tool in the arsenal for students that are in this kind of focus area to be generating their own mesh models from. A lot of times we go online and we curate and download other people's models that are out there in kind of open source sites that we use. It's very, very common. But I think it becomes really interesting for students to generate their own, whether that's via text or via image. This is an example of a cart, the prompt at the bottom, a go-kart inspired by Tron and space age furniture, curving lines, and Aero Saarinen designs, aerodynamic and sleek. That would be a text prompt put into Meshy, and this would be the kind of subsequent 3D mesh generated from that. It also generates a texture map for you, which is really great, gives students a base to work off of. And really how we envision all of these tools, maybe not so much ChatGPT as it's not generating visuals, is a base for them to work off of. So the Midjourney images that they make, they can Photoshop, they can model, they can develop the runway animations, they can use After Effects to change things. We talked about that a lot. They all wanted just a little bit more from the animations, and that's when I say, you can do that yourself, and that this just provides a strong foundation for you to be working off of. Meshy is the same. So they will be using it as a tool to generate models of their carts, and then using other kinds of digital downloads to really mod those out. So these are some examples I was running through when I was developing the course. Like I said, they'll start to hybridize them so that, again, it's not just the output from the app, but rather there's a whole other layer of authorship and autonomy put onto it before they turn that in, which I think is really important for them, again, to use the tools as a piece of the puzzle of their design method and not just as a thing for developing final works. This is an example of some image to mesh generation. It's a little bit fuzzier. It's not as clean a mesh, but similarly to the Midjourney work of the blends being kind of uncanny and curious. I am also interested in these kind of fuzzy, broken models and the ways that the meshes can be reinterpreted. This is some work that Fiona has been developing in terms of taking images from Midjourney and developing them into mesh models, which has resulted in models like this that we've been working on 3D printing. So again, it's another nice translation from maybe developing a kind of text prompt yourself about what this project could be, developing Midjourney images about how these things could be visualized or how they could take form, bringing that into Meshy and developing mesh models of these things, editing and modeling them in Rhino, Blender, et cetera, and then 3D printing them. It's like pretty wild to then have that thing in your hand that started as a coded algorithmic piece, which I wasn't expecting to be that satisfied by that, but it really was like very nice. And then this is a kind of work in progress rendering that I just saw the other day that Fiona has been working on, of combining these kinds of geometries together to be considering new sites for entertainment from industrial ghosted sites, and also considering different forms of mixed representation for these things, different styles that may also further remove the models and the work from AI generated world. And again, overlay more authorship and intrigue into the work. So some overall aims for the course, like I said before, is to use AI as a partner for iteration and development, not just for outputting things. The ENVD program is very, very short, and we don't have studios. So we only see the students for either 50 minutes 3 times a week or for an hour or so twice a week. So really have to, for about like 2 years. And then they're done. So we really have to work diligently and fast, which I think the use of AI has really helped them generate some pretty strong work in that sort of short amount of time. The results of the class have been, in my opinion, really, really good. I think in the first version of the class on day 1, I asked if anybody was skeptical of AI, not interested in AI, and excited. And there was like totally even results across the board, which I figured there would be. I like to say that I'm also kind of a optimistic skeptic. I'm always trying to see, and I always try and wait after the tools come out to see how they get better and develop further. Again, because I want students to use maintenance and care and authorship when using them, so that we're not just sort of taking the interface for granted, taking the results for granted. You can always tell when someone's just sort of typed in a text prompt, exported the image, and been like, here's my design. It's just not really how design works. It's just not really going to work for me. It's not going to work for them. They're not going to learn anything from that. They're not going to learn anything durable from that, withstanding that they can imagine iterating on things further. And because our program is so short, that like attitude towards iteration is really, really important for us. Other sort of conclusions, I'm interested in tracking the cultural commons is something that I've been saying, which has to do a little bit with how I've been writing about our interest in moving images and things like that, and as those relate to our forms of social media and the way that we intake different forms of content, and then also the way that our students are generating content that's going to go out into the world, become parts of influence, become other parts of blends and series of work. Again, encouraging students to really think critically about the things that they're making, because using AI, you can make a lot of things really quickly, and a lot of those things are bad, or not good in terms of the amount of authorship that they have, the amount of consideration that they have, the amount of work that went into them. So really, really encouraging them to not just contribute to what I and many other people call this kind of saturated scroll of influence, literal saturated scroll, but rather like really take their time with the work, make multiple versions of things, rerun things, bring things into other programs, constantly be shifting gears, as they will end up doing in practice. Lots of forms of design involve cross-contamination between different softwares, between different entities, between different partners. It's very, very common. So becoming quite familiar with giving up the idea that they stick with one thing at the beginning, develop it, and deliver it as this like precious gem that will never change. It's important for them to learn that they may need a whole other point of view for their video or for their model or for their thing that develops it further from their original and maybe even better. It's like kind of giving up a certain preciousness about the work that I think is valuable. Other sort of external uses that we'll be exploring next, continuing research fellowships that explore this form of work, and then also potentially introducing some of this work into Capstone Final Studio. I had a few students using AI in the previous version of Capstone, but I've only been here for a year and that was my first time teaching it here. So we'll see if we can get some other folks interested in using these tools in future. And then I want to put on everybody's radar Day of Design 2024 for the CADC. The theme, I believe, is collective intelligence, and it will be moderated by myself and Jared Wyndham of industrial design. Our program has invited Dr. Carla Ochoa from the University of Florida. She runs a research lab there, which is fantastic. And they're using AI, both generative AI, to talk about architecture and design, and then also to explore different forms of AI and urban technology, mapping, surveillance, data collection, all those other kinds of things. And I'm really excited to hear from her. And I'll just kind of wrap it up there. I'm happy to take any questions. This is sort of where you can find me. The AI course, I'm sure, will hopefully continue, as I'd love to keep teaching it. And hopefully by the next time I share the work, there's some new thing that we're doing in there and encouraging students to explore. So again, I really appreciate Awesome, Jerry, David, everyone else for inviting me to the forum. So thank you.
Eilis, thank you so much. That's really just incredible to see that work. We'll open it up for questions. If it's okay, I'd like to kick it off. Can you give us a general idea of, particularly since you're doing such incredible work with students directly, in terms of just the technical or like aptitude? I understand that they're developing their design skills and have certain design skills that they're bringing, but in terms of the technical tools that they're using, is there a different lift or a bigger technical lift in terms of from their understanding and learning how to use the tools from an AI perspective versus just a design perspective?
No, this is a good point. I think bless you, this class is only available to students who have already completed a full year and a half of the environmental design program, and then only open to architecture students 3rd year and above. I made one special exception this year for a really amazing student who's a 2nd year in architecture. So a lot of them come in already with digital media skills. We weren't interested in having this course be open to freshmen or foundational students, as we really found it to be pertinent that they have a strong design foundation coming in, already have a sense for what it means to iterate, already have a sense for what it means to author a piece of work. That I think making the transition to using AI tools in that sense was not difficult. But I do think, like I said before, getting over that cool hump of just making something cool quickly and burning through a bunch of AI credits, directly pulling water out of the Tennessee River to liquid cool the server that's hosting the Midjourney bot that they're using. We talked a lot about making sure that they focus on quality and not quantity, really being full of care about the images that they're pulling for the blends, about the kind of text prompts that they're generating. I do think that that was new for them because lots of work in design is slow and it takes time and models are big and it takes a while to work within them. That the fast-paced nature of this work is super attractive and alluring at first, that they have to get over that hump to then remind themselves this also should be slow practice and should be slow work.
Yeah, thanks for that. Other folks with questions? There's about 20 folks on Zoom. I understand there's some folks in person. It's pretty casual, so you're welcome to come off mute and ask questions whenever you like. Or if you post it in chat, I can read it out loud.
Yeah, and I can see the chat now too, so
Oh,
either
okay,
works.
perfect.
Yeah.
So like, do you, from your observation and your work, do you feel like the use of AI tools is changing the way we see authorship? Because like, I know a lot of people think of it as just a tool, which like authors have always used tools to make their works. But in a way, because it's drawing from sort of the collective information that already exists, there's a way you could see it where like it makes authorship more collective and less individual. Is that a shift that you've noticed or think has validity in thinking that way?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has validity, and I think it's certainly true. We talk in class a little bit about the history of collage, and how collage is similar in my mind, like both analog and digital collage, to blending with AI. As you're curating the bits and pieces that may go into the collage, at a certain point, and we talk a lot about this in design school, do you credit all of the works that went into that collage, or has there been enough levels of extraction and distance between you and the original works that make this a new original? We also talk about this in terms of art crediting and discussion, that at a certain point, do you give up all of the secrets about how something is made? I think there's too many secrets. There's too much sort of firewall in place for lots of use of AI. There's also a lot of gatekeeping about using AI, which is why it was important to me to develop a course that teaches students how to use it, and in my opinion, robustly and in more ethical ways than just like, you could use Midjourney to make this. It's like, well, how do I do that? What would be an appropriate way to use that? But I do think in using the sort of blended imagery, and ideally for me, it would be ultimately collaborating with somebody in computer science around campus to develop our own sorts of algorithms and remove ourselves from Midjourney potentially to develop our own kinds of blended prototypes. But I think when I was working on that work for the Chicago Biennale and having to credit those sources for the publication, at a certain point, we had a discussion about the works being new originals. We had collaged over them, we had modded them, we had modeled them ourselves, that the authorship became our own, but because we referenced the base of some of this, there was AI as a part of the development of this process, that became a real foothold for people to say, well, you have to credit all of those things. I think in future, we'll see a mix of both, that eventually the work, if authored enough, just like collage and with other things, that crediting for that, whether AI went into it or not, won't have to be as didactic. But I do think that it is super, super important to like credit and source the things that we're working with, especially for students now. We're almost like over crediting the things that they're doing, where they're uploading to me and documenting the prompts, the links, the sources, everything, so that they have a full record and practice of doing that I think is important for them and for me too.
Oh, a quick question. This is from online. Thanks for your wonderful presentation. Very interesting applications. You were mentioning that there would be a CADC design sort of exposition. I don't remember what date do you have dates for that you can share?
I'm happy to go back. So there will be some more information about, I believe, RSVPing. It's just so that we have numbers. But this will be in the Student Activity Center on November 15th. I'd have to check back on the time, but I believe it probably starts around 9 a.m. and goes into the afternoon.
Okay, many thanks. And great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Excellent presentation. And it happens to deal with identity and style. So if we were to look at ChatGPT, Runway.ai, and Meshy.ai as instruments, right? And you know your students. Are you able to, after they've generated an artifact or something like that, are you able to say, oh, this particular piece came from this particular student? How does their, so it's just like, you know, we have instruments like guitars, pianos, everybody that plays that instrument has a different style, right? Does style come through these tools, these instruments as well, based on what you've seen with your students?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think, and I'm sure the students would say the same. The other day we had a watch party for their runway videos, and the difference between them was drastic. Again, I think because they're curating the images and the inspiration for them that goes into the work rather than just relying on whatever is a part of the algorithm for training the bot. So we had a student, well, you saw some of the sort of playful work of Haley and Evelyn in the class that has to do with combining industrial systems, sets, inflatables, water, lighting. And a student, Anderson, has been interested in sort of liminal space and found footage and like backroom footage and abandoned architectures. His work has been really dark and ghosted and cryptic. So the juxtaposition between those has been really, really clear. And I think the authorship for them has been dynamic in that way that at times the application that they're using may exaggerate that tone that they've been developing. I think it'll be interesting to see with the meshy text prompts if that still reigns true. I would rather they develop a series of meshes from images that they've developed because I think that that is more in the spirit of the blending and the other sort of things that they've been making. But as of right now, those meshes are just slightly too broken for them to be working with off of diligently. But I do think that the authorship will still come through in the kind of text prompting for those meshes. But that is something that I'm curious about to see if that will still be the case. But I would definitely say that their design interests, their tone, their general aesthetic, the things that influence them, the kinds of things that they want to make and contribute to that scroll definitely come through.
Okay, thank you.
See, there's a question in the chat. I know with Midjourney, I often have had issues with text displaying on a generated image, even if I issue the no text command in the prompt of Discord. Are there other workarounds? This is a great point. We talked about this. I took a course in graduate school about AI, very different from the one that I teach. But we talked about how there certainly must be images in the algorithm that have copyright, text, other things, watermarks on them. That helps to produce those kinds of text interactions on the image. I think in terms of workarounds, and this is a good question, I just encourage students to go into Photoshop, edit those images themselves. There are ways in Midjourney to like edit, select, paint over certain areas of the image and generate 4 more options for that little area. But I think that's when you take it out of AI and start to mine it and work on it yourself to kind of cut those things out, or that's what I would encourage them to do. And then have you had any discussions with the College of Building Science or the School of Building Science to collaborate with the construction and other industries, particularly so that once students leave school, they aren't limited by realistic construction of the real world? This is a great question. We talked a little bit in class about how AI is influencing the construction industry pretty heavily, especially when it comes to large language models facilitating regurgitating information on site. So looking at who's in charge of the waterproofing, what's happening with the schedule today. There's also AI surveillance that goes into construction sites and things like that related to productivity. I haven't discussed much with them about interpreting more surreal or uncanny versions of structure, to be considering how, if we made an AI generated image of something that seems structurally impossible, although I feel that steel can do a whole lot, having discussions with them about how something like that might be constructed, I think would be a really exciting merger. And part of why I was excited to do this today was to share what we're up to. And if there are folks sort of around campus that are like, I've got something I could do with that, or I would want to hop on that in a form of collaboration and bring our own spin to it, I'm super, super open to that and would be curious for sure. Yeah.
Technology often influence and change.
Mhm.
About what the impact.
Yeah. No, it's great. We talk in class.
Can you repeat the question for those of us that are on Zoom?
Yeah, sure. What keeps me up at night about tools and their influences on both practice and yeah, and the implementation of them. We talk in class about how the tools generation 3, Midjourney, what are we on, like version 6 maybe? Runway Gen 3, Meshy now has Gen 3, I believe. They're increasingly photoreal. I'm not so interested in photoreal deep fakes of things. And the students aren't either. I thought that they might be, and when I asked them, they said that they weren't. Those things are predictable, and I think maybe generationally they have an interest in being unique and an individual and having their own content, their own audience, their own point of view. That generating things that they've already seen before, versions of those things, doesn't really do it for them, which was good because that was going to keep me up at night. And I think their excitement around the sort of blended, uncanny, surreal images that they could go, oh, I can get into here and do my own thing and mine this and develop this, was way stronger than just like developing an image of a building and going, this is my thing. They all didn't buy that, which was great, and I was very excited by. And I think too, I found that the first time I taught the class, because I had just joined at Auburn, on Tiger Schedule or something, it was a different class. It might have been digital drawing. So there were students that weren't planning on getting involved with AI. So I wasn't sure how it would go this time when we were up front and said, this is a class about AI. But it's been a really great turnout, both of environmental design students, architecture students. I've been talking also with Jared about a class that he's teaching in industrial design to do with AI that we're planning on, collaborating and going to reviews and things like that. That making sure that I've got, maybe it's a control thing, my finger on the pulse about what's happening with design and AI in the college is something that I'm really excited about and keeps me up at night in a good way, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned at some point wanting to probably collaborate with computer science to have sort of a more custom model for blending your images. What are some of the dissatisfactions with Midjourney, I guess? Like what would you want that model to do that Midjourney doesn't?
No, it's a good question. I think I'm pretty satisfied at present with how Blend works, but I think in the interest of the other question, that if Blend goes away, or if a different version comes out that the results are not as excitingly uncanny as they are now, then we will have to shift gears. But I think in terms of working with computer science folks is also, selfishly for me, understanding better how the coding and algorithmic prep for things like that happens. As a user of these tools, I feel an obligation to know a little bit what's happening under the hood. And also as an administrator of these tools to students, I think that's something that I feel a responsibility towards. And then also having even more control over the source content. So if we collaborated with someone in computer science, we would sort of be on the side of developing content for training a bot. But I would be curious to see what kinds of things it might pick up on. So if we as environmental design hosts a bunch of different kinds of work, as you saw earlier, there's some different focal areas. If we were able to pull a body of work from each sort of focus area, what might a bot consider environmental design work to look like? That's something I'm interested in. But I think it really is for me both understanding more about what's happening under the hood and then also thinking about really, really particular algorithms and getting better at sort of understanding the results that come out of them for me. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I know.
What's your favorite tool?
My favorite tool right now, and again, I said this before, like my research fellow Fiona is in the room to break the fourth wall for everybody on Zoom. I think right now Meshy for us has been really exciting. That thinking about how we can generate these mesh models, and Chris, I said earlier that maybe I can go back to it. Through all these videos, generating mesh models of potential architecture spaces things, and then 3D printing them has been like a really satisfying translation of the work for us to have a image of a thing. I think I can go back to, gosh, this even, to have an image of the thing, to have a model of the thing, a physical thing in our hand, a virtual digital dupe of that thing, and some text related to that thing that either help generate the image, help generate the mesh, is something that I would love to keep working on, the multiple translations of the tools. So I think Meshy and being the final one in that sequence right now has like been really satisfying to get some of those things printed and like have them in our hand. Yeah,
That's just the round trip to the build environment.
totally. Yeah. And for an ENVD student, like they may not be involved in design build at Rural Studio. They may not be involved in making mock-ups of their project. In some ways they are. They're fabricating lots of different kinds of things. But I think the ability to 3D print or like water jet cut out of stone, if we had that capability, whatever it might be, to generate these sort of prototypes of generated mesh models seems like a frontier I'm excited by. Yeah.
Do you feel like you expect less less sort of editing afterwards of the mesh models than you do sort of the earlier like image generation phases of the creation? Like, is it mostly just like, here is the mesh model that I was given and this works? Or
Yeah.
is it a similar level of going in and applying your own authorship?
I think for me, it's a similar level, if not even more for the mesh models. I think like given the general discourse around AI image generation, that it would seem that you need more authorship for those things, which I think we try to show in class that you really need to author those yourself. Whereas the mesh models, the barrier to entry to generating a mesh and editing it is much higher because not everybody has the software know-how to then take that model from Meshy and bring it into Rhino, Blender, et cetera. But anybody with Discord could get on Midjourney and generate a picture of something. But I think for us in the class, because we work with models all the time and often take them for granted as being the geometry that we're given from the model, over-authoring them, reauthoring them, kit bashing them together is something that I think is highly encouraged, that I am excited to see what they do. So that'll be right after fall break, they'll start to deep dive into generating these. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi,
Well,
can you hear
thank you.
me?
Yeah, please, last question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I have one question. Thank you so much for sharing those information. And I'm so glad to see that the AI in the industrial design field. So my question is, will you mind to put the entire class, the generated AI or image or video, So if you count those class, so they should belong to which stage of the design circle? Like at the very beginning, like the brainstorm, or like a iteration, or the deliver the product.
Mm,
So
that's a
which stage you can put this class?
I would say it's somewhere between a design development stage and a production, like a even like a construction administration phase, because the students are coming in with their own interests already into the class, that we aren't having to develop those per se, but iterating and developing concepts is happening here, and then producing artifacts to provide proof of concept or prototype um, for those iterations. I would say it falls somewhere into that camp. Ideally, and there may not be enough time in the 3 credit hour course for them to 3D print their models, ideally that would be a kind of final phase of the work so that by the end they have a kind of artifact that they're walking away with.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, actually I have a second question. So, because the AI generated model usually is a mesh, and do you know, and in the future, so how do you try to convert those mesh model to like more like catch-up or the alias those models? Is there any way to translate those model to there?
Yeah, so in Meshy, you're able to download the mesh that it provides to you as an OBJ file, an FBX file. I believe you can, yeah, you can also download it as an STL file, which is the file type that you need to 3D print something. FBX and OBJ is what we would use to bring it into Rhino or Blender, which are 3D modeling softwares. And then that's where they'll edit them in Rhino or Blender, render them, and then STL is what they would convert that to for printing, all of which can be done in Blender and Rhino, but right from the software itself, there are multiple file formats that you can download it as.
Oh, I mean, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I mean the convert the concept to the real. Is it, because I saw someone that posted these questions on the chat. So I mean, those models can be used in the real life, like create a building or do some match production.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I'm sure the shift in scale would affect the sort of mesh and the geometry of the model. If you were to 3D print a 1-for-1 full scale thing or build a 1-for-1 full scale version of what you are generating. But again, in some of the interest of the rest of the course, I think it could provide a strong foundation for one to build off of. I think at the very least, we talked a little bit about generating parts to a whole using Meshy. So if someone was interested in developing panels for a facade, could you potentially develop a mesh or a tile or a piece that gets repeated into a larger system and print that piece? I think all of that would be possible. So I think at present, a 1-for-1 translation of these things into a full-scale prototype might be challenging, as Meshy is again geared towards VR, XR, AR, game building modes. I do think that there's great potential for developing parts to whole. It generates closed meshes, so it would be pretty straightforward to print something like that as a piece that could get aggregated over and over again into a larger building system.
Got you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks for those questions, and just Eilish, thank you so much. I mean, this is really incredible to see not only just your ideas around it, and then but just the student engagement element as well. Really great stuff. Thanks so much for taking the time. For those of you that are joining in, we do these AI@AU forum talks throughout the semester. They're typically on Fridays, and the recordings are available on the AI@AU initiative website. You're welcome to visit and see some of the past recordings, and this recording will be made available there in a few days to weeks as well. And join us again in the future, and thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.